When it comes to weapons in TF2, most of them were added to the game with a specific purpose in mind. The backscatter does more damage from behind, the amputator lets you heal teammates, the gloves of running urgently make you a fast boy, and so on. Occasionally, weapons will get reworked so the way you use them slightly changes. The extinguisher, for instance, has found about every combination of ways to do more damage towards burning enemies imaginable. The extinguisher has had a ton of different buffs and nerfs over the years, but ultimately they all make the weapon accomplish the same goal: you do more damage to burning enemies. But some weapons in the game have been altered to such a degree that they're completely unrecognizable from their original form, and while I think the broader history of weapon balancing is interesting, I'm more focused on the weapons that are either mostly or entirely different from what they were when they were added. There are only a few weapons that have been changed this drastically, but looking at what they were originally supposed to be compared to what they are now is super interesting to me, at least. For instance, the soda popper was originally added to the game with a completely different gimmick in mind. The height meter didn't always give you 6 jumps when you activate it. That was a change that wasn't introduced until Christmas of 2013. Originally, hype was built by running around and gave you mini crits for 8 seconds when it activated. This version of the soda popper is a bit weird to me, since I'm not really sure what it was trying to be. Since the hype automatically activated whenever the meter was full, you didn't really get much control over the timing of your mini crits. You either had to hope that you were close to someone when they activated, or precisely plan how you were moving so you ended up next to an enemy when the meter was completely filled. I guess they figured that this weapon granting mini crits was a bit redundant since the Criticola already existed, so changing the soda popper's height meter to be a mobility tool and eventually changing the meter to fill with damage instead of running were both good moves on Valve's part. Still, though, building a meter by running around was an interesting game mechanic, even if it was a little too easy for scouts to abuse. The Pretty Boy's pocket pistol has been through quite a few iterations of a healing-based pistol. If you've been playing the game for a while, you probably remember when it healed you for 7 health per shot regardless of distance and was the most broken thing on the planet. But when the pocket pistol was originally added, it wasn't a healing pistol at all. Originally, it gave you an extra 15 max health and fall damage immunity for the trade-off of a slower firing speed and more damage taken from fire. It didn't really work well with the public enemies set because the fall damage negation was pointless since the babyface's blaster punished you for jumping, but on its own, its original concept was pretty interesting. As you might expect, having 140 HP scouts running around was a little much, so in the gunmetal update they changed the health bonus to a healing on hit stat. But I really wish they kept the fall damage immunity stat on at least one of Scout's weapons, since it was an incredibly useful tool to have on a lot of the more vertical maps like Hightower. Many people consider the panic attack to be one of the most perfectly side-grade options in the game, since having faster deploy speed, higher point-blank damage, less accuracy, and a fixed bullet spread makes it consistently a great alternative to the shotgun in a lot of close-quarters situations. I'm just glad it ended up being this way, though, because when it was first added, it was sort of a hot mess. For whatever reason, Valve decided that having a shotgun that functions like the beggar's bazooka was a good idea for a weapon. In order to fire the original panic attack, you had to load in all the shells first, and because the clip automatically fired everything when it was full, you had to start loading shells before you encountered an enemy to have a chance at winning a fight. I'm pretty sure the only time I ever saw this thing used was in TF2 x10, where you could effectively use it as a bullet hose. Eventually, they upped the reload and firing speed, increased the deploy speed, and even let you hold shells in the chamber when it was full instead of automatically firing them immediately, which were all great changes, but the weapon was still super gimmicky. Jungle Inferno was when it was eventually reworked to its current version, which even though was definitely to the benefit of the panic attack, I still miss the weird shenanigans that you could pull with the Beggar's Bazooka version. The Power Jack is easily one of the most valuable and recognizable melee weapons in Pyro's kit. Giving Pyro a melee option that grants extra movement speed is absolutely massive for the class, considering that all of his other mobility tools have to compete for his hotly contested secondary slot. But to my surprise, the Power Jack wasn't actually added to be a mobility tool. Instead, the original version of the Power Jack had a 20% damage increase and heals you for 75 HP every time you got a kill with it. Since this was added alongside the degreaser, my thought was that they initially intended you to pop an enemy up into the air with the degreaser, hit them once with a flare or shotgun, and finish them off with your Power Jack to heal whatever damage you took during the fight. And honestly, I kinda wish they kept it this way because Pyro's old 3-hit combos that used the degreaser's universal weapon switch speed were a lot of fun to pull off. Now, the stats they ended up giving the Power Jack were not entirely random. Back when the game was definitively pay to win, and by that I mean that having a full item set equipped, cosmetic and everything, gave you a universal class stat boost, the Gas Jockey set did something similar. When you had the degreaser, the Power Jack, and the attendant equipped at the same time, you get a free 10% movement speed increase regardless of which weapon you were using. Around the time that Valve did away with the terrible item set system, they decided that having the Power Jack be a heal on kill based item wasn't what they wanted, so they translated the item set's old movement speed bonus onto the Power Jack. I just wish they made a separate weapon to fit this purpose though, because unlike some of the weapons that got completely changed, the old power jack was a super cool idea that's still mostly unique to his kit. Now I say mostly because the back scratcher is a pretty decent spiritual successor since it does similar things, but it doesn't have the same appeal as a combo finisher as the old power jack did. The Claymore's current set of stats is actually not too far off from what it was when it was originally added, but it wasn't like this for the entire span of the game. For a few years, it was almost an entirely different weapon. During the Tough Break update, when Valve decided that any weapons that weren't the meta should be remade into slightly worse versions of the weapons that were the meta, the Claymore got a completely new facelift. Or more accurately, it got its face completely removed and replaced with bologna slices because the stats that they gave it are a complete anomaly. Instead of being a unique sword that gives you slightly longer charges, they made it give you 25 health back on a kill. Now, when you compare this with a sword that gives you back half of your max health on a kill with absolutely no downsides at all if you're running it on pure demo night, the main function of this weapon's kinda bad. My only guess for these changes is that they wanted to make it the definitive best sword for hybrid night since you could charge to finish off enemies and restore some health along the way, but 25 health is not that much, and I'd rather have a longer charge for better mobility and easier finish-offs anyway. And this is also the same update where they made swords take longer to deploy and holster and also removed the Tide Turner's charge crit, so honestly only God knows their reasoning for these changes. Thankfully, most of these changes were reverted during the Jungle Inferno update, and after trying it for Hybrid Knight myself, I think it's in a pretty good spot being a mix between the two versions as it is. So those are all the weapons that have effectively been replaced with brand new weapons within the game's lifetime. However, I do want to give a couple honorable mentions to weapons that have kept the same core functionality but have also had their use cases changed. The Winger didn't always have its signature increased jump height stat, and the L'Etranger didn't always have the increased cloak duration stat. Both of those stats were added onto the weapons later down the road after Valve decided that nobody was using them. Similarly, the Home Wrecker used to be a dedicated building smasher until they added the ability to remove sappers sometime later. The old Equalizer used to have the effects of both the current Equalizer and the Escape Plan, but also without the Mark for Death stat while active to balance it out. Considering how good the Escape Plan currently is and how niche the Equalizer is, I'd say the weapon split effectively made the Equalizer obsolete itself. The Backburner used to give you an extra 50 max health on a wearer, and even though that version couldn't air blast at all, it's still terrifying to think about an overhealed 335 HP Pyro running right at you. The Persian Persuader gave you health instead of charge from ammo boxes. The Reserve Shooter used to mini-crit any airborne target, regardless of whether they were rocket jumping or just falling off a small ledge. The Tomislav used to spin up almost instantaneously. The Short Circuit had its projectile deleter function as a small field in front of you instead of a giant energy ball. The Bizarre Bargain would subtract a head from you if you missed. The Darwin's Danger Shield used to be a sniper deleter instead of a pyro deleter. The Enforcer used to have the damage bonus while undisguised instead of disguised. The Vitasol let you keep your Uber on death with no prerequisite whatsoever, and the beta version of the Nastasha restored health on every single hit, effectively making you unkillable. So yeah, I know people complain about the game being unbalanced in its current state, but it really has come a long way from what it used to be. Anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you to the people on my Discord for voting for this specific video concept. These analytical essay style videos are a lot of fun, so I'll keep in coming until I'm completely out of ideas. Oh, and hey, my Discord link is in the description if you want to vote on the next idea yourself. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like. If you hated this video, please make and upload a 3-hour video essay explaining why, and most importantly, have a good one.